So when I was young, right, I really like to spend time with my mom. And every day when I come back from school, right, I'll go to the kitchen to help her cook. And the dish that she really likes to cook is chicken stew, right? So I remember we buy the chicken from the market and we bring it home. And I noticed that she had to cut off the head and the leg of the chicken before putting it into a pot, right? So as a very curious little boy asking, Mom, why do you cut off the head and leg of chicken? Do you know what Mom said? Mom said that she doesn't know because that was how Grandma did it. Right? So a couple months down the road, right, we are at Grandma's place and I was asking, Grandma, why do you cut off the head and leg of chicken? And do you know what she said? She said that we had a very small pot. If we don't cut off the head and leg of chicken, we can't put it into the pot. Right? So in life, it's always very important to understand the why. Right? So many years ago, right, I was in the military, and we were on this navigation exercise, right? We had to get from point A to point B to point C. And I was partnered with this guy, and he really wanted to navigate, right? And I was very happy to be the passenger. So we were walking, and we were walking for hours. And all of a sudden, right, I grabbed his bag because we were literally standing at the edge of a cliff. Right, so he looked at the compass, he looked at the map, he turned around, looked at me. He looked at the compass, he looked at the map, and he turned around, looked at me. And do you know what he said? He said that the land was wrong, right? Not that the map was wrong, but the land was wrong. So the map is not necessarily the territory, right? So good afternoon, everyone. I applaud you for staying so long, right? All I ask is if you sleep and you snore, right, please don't wake me, right? I'll do my best to keep everyone entertained. And as you can tell from my accent, I'm from Singapore, right? So I'm effectively bilingual. I speak English and Singlish, right? So if any questions along the way, just raise your hand, pull my hair, and ask away, right? I wanted to be a bit candid in sharing, right? Because I think that's the only way we can, as an ecosystem, right, move forward, right? And unfortunately, that's how I feel today, right? The bird and not the snake, right? We just do not know where the next danger is lurching around. And it's always going to be a cat and mouse game, right? It doesn't matter who you work for. You will never have enough resources, right, to mitigate against all possible threats out there. And, I'm not going to bore you with figures, but, obviously, the issue with the digital space, okay, and the payment space is humongous. And quite frankly, I think a lot of individuals, even including myself, right, don't even know how big that problem is. And quite frankly, right, I didn't even know what Mastercard is. Okay, Mastercard is not just a payment gateway. If you are using GrabPay, for example, GrabPay is a Mastercard wallet. If you use Apple Pay, Apple Card, that's a Mastercard solution. And from this year onwards, if you purchase a Samsung phone, the Samsung wallet is actually a Mastercard wallet, right? And going back to what Richard, alluded to, obviously when Russia invaded Ukraine last year, we were given a task to disconnect Russia, for example, from SWIFT, right? So if you transfer money from one bank to another, it either goes through FAST or SWIFT. Those are Mastercard products as well. So a lot of you are using our Mastercard product without really knowing. And my role here is really to protect the network. At any given second, we process up to 10,000 transactions. At any given moment, right, between 10 to 50 billion US dollars actually sits on network. So it's really important for us to obviously ensure that there's zero disruption, right? The mean time between failure is actually zero for us. And obviously everyone's seen all these slides where, the gravity of the problem is huge, where as much as $10.5 trillion, right, will go towards cybercrime. But a lot of us are only looking at direct impact. We're not looking at the long tail of the impact, which is roughly estimated to be about 67% alone the first year, right? And this is how frequent a ransomware actually happens, every 11 seconds. And that's like 2021. There was slight dip in terms of number of ransomware attacks last year, but unfortunately the severity actually increased. Right? Again, depending on sort of like industry you're in, the impact is not exactly the same. If you're in pharma, for example, if you're in financial services like we are, because of the PII, the personal identifying information that we hold, okay, it's more lucrative. And on average, right, okay, on average, it takes close to 200 days to identify a breach. But I will personally argue, right, the number is a lot longer. The problem is that state actors, when they get in your system, right, they are not going to disclose to you until you find out, which could be years later, right? And obviously, almost every company out there, right, is struggling to keep up with the threats out there and increasing, the expenses in terms of protecting the network, right? So the question is, how are we as collective ecosystem, right, go about protecting our entire ecosystem, right? I'll just skip some of the boring parts. And supply chain attacks is something that we also, look into. But before that, right, I'd like to just quickly run through how Mastercard works, right? Because I think there's a general lack of understanding of who we are and how we operate, right? So for example, I'll walk you through an example, okay? Let's say Danny here on the bottom, okay, walks into McDonald's, okay, and I spend 100 ringgit on McDonald's, right? But what happens on the back end is, at the end of the month, Citibank, for example, which issues me the credit card, sends me a bill for $100, right? So what happens? You pay Citibank $100. Citibank takes $1 and sent it to the merchant's bank. In Singapore, for example, McDonald's uses OCBC, right? So OCBC will take another $1, okay, flips 10 cents to us, and gives $97.90 to McDonald's. So you as a consumer think that I am paying McDonald's 100 ringgit, but what happens on the back end is that Citibank, the bank that issues your credit card, takes $1. OCBC, who is the bank, the merchant bank of McDonald's, takes $1 and 10 cents get flipped to us, right? So why is that important to know? Okay, not just as a consumer. You have to understand that the card data, okay, for example, Citibank would have your information. Who is the card holder? We don't have the ability, if you give us that 16 number pen, right, we don't have ability to identify whose credit card that is. But we can point you, this card is issued by Citibank, right? And we will point law enforcement towards the area. Obviously, Citibank, which is our customer, we have the ability to work with them, but it's a lot easier if we have a subpoena, for example, or we have a warrant for us to work with our customer, which is Citibank, because the contractual agreement that we have with them is pretty strict. And that's not even to mention the regulatory requirements that they have, right? And that's not, again, depending on jurisdiction, right? The data privacy laws that are in place. So it's actually pretty difficult to walk into a bank, right, to obtain a set of this side of information. And just walk through some of the cases that I've just investigated recently, right? So if you look at the face value of this card, okay, was issued in Russia, and it's a Mastercard. But when we swipe it through the system, what you see, okay, is actually a Visa card issued by a bank in Japan. And the EMV chip, this is completely fake. So you simply cannot look at the face value of a card to determine its pedigree. Okay? Who is the issuer? Who is the name of the card holder, information, so on and so forth. And that's why in our new generation of card like Apple Card, right? Okay, and we're partnered with other partners like even Grab, for example. You essentially have almost no information except maybe your name if you as a user choose to be on it. But obviously we are walking away from issuing physical card. And it's not just an ESG issue anymore. You have to understand that a credit card is not just a payment instrument. It represents status, for example, Because I remember like 30 years ago, right, I felt so cool if I could whip out, a nice gold card and flip it to the waitress, right? So it's simply not just a question of whether we can transact, with a plastic or metal card. It goes above and beyond that. Okay? Unfortunately, simple things like card skimming is pretty rampant. Okay? Not just in this country, but countries around us. Okay? Unfortunately, Bangkok, for example, right, is the credit card fraud capital of the world. So I'll be very careful when I use a credit card in Bangkok, right? If I can't see the point of sales or the POS, right, I may not necessarily want to hand over my card, to the server. And even simple things like, a skimmer, right? So essentially, this looks almost like this, okay? So what you do is the fraudsters will put this over your POS, your point of sales. So you may think that I'm swiping one time, but there's one reader for the real POS, and then another reader to skim your details. Even at ATMs as well, okay? But this is slowly going away. In many ATMs in this country, in Singapore, and some, in Bangkok, right? Okay, you see a green color plastic piece in front of the card insert. And that's what we call a jigger, right? So when you insert the card, it actually jigs the card. So even if there's a reader in front of the, the card insert, the reader will not be able to read your card because it's being jigged. And obviously, having a card details is not enough. I need your PIN, right? So they will place a fake, keyboard on top of the actual ATM to steal your PIN. So once I have your PIN, I have your PIN, I have access to your card. And if you look at this, event, it looks pretty prestigious, almost similar to a hotel like this, right? And you see, our logo out there, with partnering bank and stuff like that, okay? And it's all over social media. But guess what? This event is completely fake. Organized crime, fraudsters out there today are using your company, your logo, getting actors to pretend to be, some senior staff of your organization to lend them credibility, right? And Singapore may be a safe place, but low crime doesn't necessarily mean no crime, right? So recently in Singapore, right, this individual that was selling his services on e-commerce platforms, right? So what he did was, if you provide your personal credit card details, he can fabricate a card for you, right? He can make your your normal card, for example, a gold or platinum card, or maybe do something even more sexy, right? Or this is the Grab card we're talking about. It doesn't necessarily have to come with your details, right? So you can put, details of, maybe your superhero, whatever that is you wanted. And we've been working with the police since day one, right? But unfortunately, the gentleman was arrested, but he was released. Because the consumer gave consent to the individual, right, to duplicate the card for him. But my point is this. If you have the credit card detail, I can purchase this sort of pen details from the dark web, from the deep web. It's quite easy for me to fabricate, a physical card to use it. Okay. And I just want to quickly talk about, so why are we here? Okay. If you have a single sort of like small issue on credit card, fraudulent transaction, or payment gateway which you think is suspicious, right? Okay, that's where you normally go to the bank. But if you see something a bit bigger that impacts whole of society, that a huge syndicate is behind it, that's where we will come in to assist, to work with you. At the end of the day, it's like investigation 101, which Ramesh from PSI will tell you, you follow the money. Because what we want to do is, it's pretty sexy to like kick down, the door of a warehouse and arrest folks for, this sort of like fraudulent products and stuff like that. But we personally believe that if we are able to take away their payment gateway, it's going to hurt them a lot more. Because it's quite easy for me to, continue producing this sort of like fraudulent products. But in today's financial market, right, it is extremely difficult to obtain a fraudulent payment gateway because you need to go through the bank's know your customer, right, your KYC. They will also go through your AML, your anti-money laundering, and CFT, countering of financing of terrorism. It's extremely difficult for illicit business, okay, or syndicate to obtain a proper payment gateway. And we want to work with you, okay, to make sure that we take this away from them, because this will be a pain point. Because the bad actors, it's very easy to set up a alternate, a secondary, URL, a portal. But if you can't pay them, then it presents a problem for them, right? It hurts them a lot more, right? And these are some of the requirements that you need to apply for payment gateway through the banks. So one very simple tip, right? So when you get onto an e-commerce platform, or when you are required to pay anything on the portal, okay, what you should do is just right-click and view the page source, okay? You should be able to see something like this. Has Visa, has Mastercard, has PayPal, okay? To help you authenticate that this is a proper payment gateway. Because a lot of times the source will point you to an alternate payment gateway, which is, typically fraudulent. So with that, right, I'd like to just leave you the words of Stanley McChrystal, right, which says, it takes a network to defeat a network, right? So with that, hopefully, through conversations and meetings like this, we're able to collaborate and partner better, because I think it's important for all of us to take a time out, even a little, right, to come together to share what keeps us up at night, to network, but more importantly, right, to harmonize our response. Because, for example, if company A has, more security measures, but company B doesn't, right, you are simply target hardening one company, forcing the bad guys to target shift to a softer company. Great for company A, but not necessarily, so great for company B or ecosystem. So unless we can collectively come together to work together, right, will we collectively be successful at the end of the day? Right, with that, I think that's all from my side. Thanks, everyone.